Does anyone else have anything they want to add to the agenda?
I was actually looking for that agenda. Do you have a link to it?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess it's not in the meeting info.
Oh, is it not in there anymore?
No, I think it's like the new CNCF event, right?
Yeah, it's not in there.
Project dashboard wasn't loading earlier. Let me see. I thought there was something added, but I don't know if it actually shows up in the public link. Huh. Yeah, there is a link on the meeting that in the admin section, but I don't know how to get that to show up if you have to like join the meeting through the LFX platform before you can see that. All right, is that first item yours, Brian? The split configs.
Technically, it's the second one, I think, but yeah.
Oh, well, okay, yeah. I'll do my demo at the end. So yeah.
Okay, I'm right recently here because I'm doing this new geocaching system. I've been using
Okay.
It's that one
Yeah,
below it.
maybe something if we do that.
that. So, like, I have built a whole new way of doing this system. Then I'm gonna publish. I'm gonna write about that. I will,
I'm just reading that one to catch up on the support runtime config directory.
Yeah, so I kind of came up with a solution on this because last time we talked about it, uh, there was some question on consumers of this and like having cry stuff in here and because there's stuff like hot annotations, container annotations, stuff like that. And what I kind of came up with is basically we have a core type that has stuff, and any client that wants to have other stuff would use a different type to unmarshal that. And so, and here cry has wraps the type with the cry specific stuff for annotations and what have you. It kind of allows it to be used for kind of anybody. One thing I kind of thought of after creating this or after pushing this change was maybe we should say that if we do this like this, we should have, I put in a comment at the end there. We should kind of say people who do this should namespace their extra configs behind e.g. IO containerd cry v1 runtime. So we don't just have a bunch of stuff mixed in places that kind of makes things confusing.
And why do you need snipshotter in the runtime configuration?
This is runtime class.
Yep.
It is runtime class.
Look through. Need to. I can double check that. Probably just pulling in from what was in cry and didn't think too much about it.
Okay, gotcha.
What's new with your latest change from last week?
So basically the change is making it so clients that are consuming it are kind of providing their own custom types with their own fields, rather with their own extensions to this, and then we just have this core type for standard stuff instead of trying to figure out some specific core model that works for everything. So you have a base model that has the runtime type and all that kind of stuff, and then anything else can just come like CRI does and adds their own fields that they unmarshal that data with.
So it's like containerd loads configuration from disk and then provides it to the underlying runtime. Is that the idea?
The idea is so for instance, NerdCuddle could come and read these configurations, load it, and ignore stuff like cry specific fields because it wouldn't even be part of the type that it's unmarshaling. Yeah.
Okay.
And then of course we get like drop-ins here for CRI as well. So drop in a config and have CRI be able to pick it up. And hopefully down the road we have like config reload or something like that, so we can drop a file in and not have to restart containerd to get a new runtime.
Runtimes like Kata, they already use like a file-based configuration, like a configuration file stored on disk. They just provide it externally, right? So I guess my question is, why don't runtimes load their configuration directly instead of having containerd load configuration and provide it to the runtime?
So this is how containerd discovers the runtimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't seen your PR before, so I'm confused. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so it's taking what's kind of already in the main containerd config toml and splitting that out. And actually right now it's just for CRI. So they're like nested under the CRI config type. Kind of splitting that out into a separate directory where you can just drop in your runtime configs.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I was just trying to, I'm trying to understand quickly, because I haven't looked at the change, the new io.containerd.cri.v1.runtime. So I see it's plugins dot. Is that expected where they're going to get attached to the plugin TOML, or like, or they're just completely separate, just like the host configs? Like,
So I didn't code that part out. That kind of came up to me after I pushed and kind of had this thought. So the so the way CRI works is it wraps the core type, the core runtime config struct, and injects its own fields into it, which would be pod annotations, container annotations. I can't remember all the other ones it does. But that's the idea, is CRI has its own custom configurations. And when it goes to load these runtime configs, it will load it in the context of this custom type, which is wrapping the core config type. And then same thing, like if nerdct, I don't know why they would wanted to have separate stuff. They could do that, or they could use CRIs if they wanted to.
Did we do a bad job with config merging? Because this feels like the pair makes sense, but I would imagine we already can consolidate config pieces into a single configuration file, and it should be feasible to do the same with config merging.
You mean with like comp.d style?
Yeah.
So that came up before and kind of was like told we don't want to do that. And so that's kind of why we did stuff this way. Granted, I've been working on this for a couple of years or maybe a year, trying different things and letting it sit forever because I don't have time to work on it.
well, my understanding is the main difference is that it's you can drop it in with anything that goes into the config merging requires a daemon restart.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the second thing is that it's intended to be used not just by like CRI, but it's more generic. Like, oh, it's more just putting it in a more generic location. I guess anything could use that, but like you don't want clients like NerdCuddle having to like load the whole containerd config just to pull out some one value.
Yeah, and this doesn't take care of config reloading right now, or with the drop-in and automatically detecting the new runtime yet. This is just setting up the stage for that and having a place to drop config files without having to merge it into your containerd config and all that.
But functionally, it's equivalent as the merging we have today. Right. I mean, I've used that for some setting up some things, and it seems like it works for creating new runtime classes, just doing the merge.
Are you saying that there is a comp.d now? I don't recall that.
Yeah, I mean, you can set up the comp.d with, or whatever you want to name it. I was playing around with K3s and setting it up like that, and it actually worked out pretty easily.
I'm just curious, when would NerdCuddle would want to add a new runtime class dynamically?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand.
So, config merging versus this approach. The biggest difference here that we specify config once, and then we need to reload the daemon to pick up new changes. And this one is sort of dynamic version when you can place a file and Containerd will pick that up without restart. And Derek mentioned that Nerdcuttle would want that just to pick
Well, I was
up.
thinking more just for reading it, not necessarily for dropping
Yeah.
it in. I mean, maybe it wants to drop it in, but I was thinking more
okay.
just for other consumers of like specific parts of the configuration, kind of like the registry configs. It's
Yep.
I mean, maybe they do want to be able to do that though. Like I could picture Nerdcuttle wanting to like make dynamic changes to the runtime class based on like user configuration or something.
I would prefer reading config files in one way, to be honest. Like it sort of makes sense, but also we could just improve config margin, make it better.
So when I started this, we didn't have config merging, so I didn't know that was a thing. Still, or yeah, I think it's okay. The one thing is like we don't have a place to put generic runtime configs. That would config merge would be for cry, and dropping in configs for cry. Not sure of another place to do that other than just I guess we could create a generic field for runtimes that people can stick in stuff into.
It's still an entry in the map, right? Of runtime configurations. Oh, it's CRI specific.
Yeah. The runtime configs are CRI specific.
Although it would be nice to split the runtime configs out from CRI, but
Yeah. Like unless we want like dynamic thing, that would make sense. But otherwise, I would chase existing thing.
So dynamic thing is definitely one of the reasons I started working on this is because the way people tend to install a runtime, like at least in the Kubernetes land, is to outside of stamping a node and what have you, like where they don't control necessarily the node image, is to run a daemon set and install your binaries in there. Then they've got to edit the containerd config and then restart containerd. That's kind of the place where it's like, well, if we could just drop a file in there and then have containerd pick it up.
Yeah,
which again, this PR isn't doing yet, but that's kind of the idea.
And GPU operator does that as well, and they like restart the daemon from the daemon set, and that would make it easier for them as well. Okay, I'll take a look on the PR. I don't want to consume all the time. But this is nice.
yeah, and there might be other ways we can consider that. I mean, whether or not dynamic configs is just hard, and I feel like we've purposely not, or we've segmented them out. Like the certs.d stuff, we specifically just made it a separate configuration. To Maxim's point, it's like every time we add a new configuration, it makes it a little bit more complicated. Like we still haven't fully split out all the search.d stuff from the CRI config. I'm definitely in favor of moving stuff out of the CRI config.
Yep.
All right. Well, the next item was also CRI config related. What's the? Oh, this is expose the CRI config. We
Exactly.
discussed this one before.
This is like bringing back an old feature from 1.7 that was removed in 2.0. I think mostly because of like dependency weirdness. I like it's kind of fun listening to the previous discussion because it's kind of like the same problems that I see constantly with the challenges of restarting Containerd to get configuration picked up, but also at the same time, there isn't a good way of getting what configuration has actually been loaded by Containerd. But like I guess this is also kind of like selfish in the sense of adding the things that I need rather than maybe solving the greater challenge.
Do you remember
Um,
that we don't expose Containerd configuration on purpose, but I don't remember why.
I thought we did and we removed it because it was not a defined structure.
I don't really remember the reasons for it. I think they're one of the arguments against having the CRI config was that it wasn't a defined structure, but the other one was that that it would complicate how, like, it was before the plugin system, so it complicated how to even access the config in the first place that had been loaded.
Mike Brown, I thought you were looking at this at some point. Did I misremember that? Specifically around like what the structure could get returned here, because we have had this discussion following this removal or the previous change. So
It was a long time. The conversation was a long time ago.
it was a little
memory is
bit
faded.
while ago.
Yeah, I remember the conversation, but it never went far.
So what are you proposing here? Like what are you suggesting we add?
So in this kind of like the PR that I've added, it basically adds back the previous behavior of 1.7 that is now possible. Like after the 2.0 refactoring, it was actually kind of impossible to even get this configuration out in the code path that was called. So what this adds is basically the what's that called? The image configuration part of Containerd config that has been loaded that CRI is then reading. And the real challenge is mostly that like it's even when I debug, but like I use this obviously for programmatic use, but even when debugging, it's very difficult to even determine what configuration has been actually loaded when Containerd starts. And config dump obviously doesn't actually expose what's been loaded, but it just compiles all the configuration from disk and then gives it to you. So it's not actually like a truth. It's not like a source of truth of what actually is being used.
Are there specific keys that you want access to? I think that's where the conversation I remember kind of stopped last time was trying to enumerate what fields should be exposed.
Yeah, so like for me, for Spiegel, it's mostly knowing that the configuration path is set and that discard unpacked layers is false, and that's explicitly because functionality in Spiegel depends on that, like explicitly being set properly. And as we know, most cloud providers configuring Containerd after node startup is kind of difficult, if not impossible, without having to like taint a node and then restart Containerd after configuring it. So that's kind of like this is mostly for sanity checking because a lot of people just kind of like deploy something and then go, I don't know why this isn't working, and there's no way of like checking your Containerd instance to see if it's even going to work or not.
Yeah, I think my opinion on this is the same as before, that we should expose the config, or we should expose configuration values, but we don't want to export our configuration structure. As my understanding is, this is kind of becomes a implicit API, or it basically makes the internal structure an implicit API. Like, we don't have a defined JSON structure here that we want to export. Like, I would rather pick key by key into a defined output structure and send that out. And if we want to add more stuff, we can add more stuff to it. But then we have a stable output structure, and that's completely separated from what our internal config looks like. And then if we want to add stuff like registry configs that are part of like that maybe are resolved from like certs.d, we can add that. Or if you want to add configuration that's not explicitly part of the config or part of like a different plugin, that can be done as well, because not all our configuration is in that one config struct. Like, some stuff is derived from, say, like another plugin exports some configuration value. So like that's tended to be the way we try to like, every plugin has its own configuration, but then when it exports configuration, it does it in a very defined way. So like, it'll either export keys on the plugin structure, or I think in this case, it could explicitly define like which keys it wants to export. And you could be very selfish in terms of like defining that key set to be what you need initially. But yeah, I'm very hesitant of what it does. Takes the config and just marshals it out.
I can agree with that, but then I would counter with the fact that we already like output configuration that doesn't have an exported struct.
In CRI today?
Yes. So if you set the verbose flag when you call status, it takes the CRI config.config and marshals it and puts it into the response info.
Yeah, we did that a long time ago.
Yeah.
Back before we were, worried about that. And that extra info is a map, and it's optional.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really typed. I guess you can presume it is, but it wasn't really typed. The map.
But, yeah, sorry.
I'm looking through it
We
right
can
now.
convert. We can amend, augment the existing output to demonstrate what's really going on now. With the new host TOML files, with the new config for mirroring.
What is the structure of this response supposed to be?
It's anything we want it to be, pretty much.
Or yeah, there is
It's
this
a
status
map
response.
with a string and then some text. And we were just doing some default JSON, right, for a couple of the structs. And again, this is 8-9 years old.
Yeah.
We could obfuscate it, right? We could create an externalization struct like Derek's talking about. For the content pieces, it wouldn't match exactly what on purpose. It wouldn't match exactly what you had before, but it would provide something new where you could do what you were doing before, right?
Maybe that's what we talked about before, was adding a new key. I thought we removed some of this, but I think what you're saying is that some of these values were in the previous config, but when the config structure moved, it's not there anymore.
Right.
I'm
Which is
happy.
exactly why we don't want to expose the internal structure.
Yes, exactly. But mirroring was so cool.
I see the value in like, or the reasoning behind like, oh yeah, we did this 8 years ago, and that's not a reason to continue doing it. And instead, maybe go like, hey, let's try to slowly fix it instead, and do it the right way. So if that's
Yeah.
updating the protobuf and the API and adding an explicit section for like image config, because it's like another issue with like exposing all the image configuration is the fact that like you would expose like auth configuration, even though it's like, yeah, that whole debacle of like where to put authentication like credentials in like plain text files is like another issue. But
Yeah. Well, it's no longer cry specific, so we should be
yeah,
able to derive the information that you're looking for, right, for externalization through some internal
yeah,
service or a host service, I think, Derek. And then, but it just needs to be, known that this is going to be externalized, right?
Mhm.
Not just grab the structure.
I'm completely happy changing the PR or just like creating a new PR that instead tries to like make an official API for at least the things that I find of interest to access, and then that might be like a good template for the future of like, okay, this is how we're going to do it, and just like maybe even do like a comment there, basically being like, hey, like don't add more things here, like don't. what's there is there, and then everything else should go through like proper channels.
Are there specific keys in that status that are defined? Like,
The ones that are not optional. He mentioned that you could get, the detailed status.
Mhm.
When you ask for additional, detail, verbose, we add the map that has all that extra content he's talking about. We do have Kubernetes fields where the kubelet required some certain things, and they normally only call status non-verbose. But you can call status verbose, anytime you want.
yeah.
But yeah, the default is not verbose. So we don't see this kind of problem in the kubelet. They're not relying on any of the fields. To my knowledge, the kubelet is not relying on any of the additional mapped fields, right, in the verbose struct. Info, we call it, if I remember serves.
You would hope
Okay.
not.
I mean, yeah, I was just looking at the cry cuddle info output. There's the status, and he's saying that's part of it, but everything is at kind of the same level, which is kind of weird to me. But
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously or maybe it's not obvious. The runtime status is not for a particular handler. It's please give me your status for the entire runtime. And we did our best to try to drop in things that were relative to the CRI API, which included image services and Um,
but
so
that status structure is actually consumed by the kubelet. Like you see like
the fields
status
that are
conditions.
defined, right? Yeah, you'll see a list of fields get assigned, right, in the beginning, and then you'll see it call a cry extra info kind of API, where it adds that map of additional info fields. I don't know if you're looking at the code.
Yeah, well, I was looking at the PR, which has like an example cry cuddle info output, and it's not like everything is nested under an info tag. It's more just everything is at the top level, so it's a bit confusing. But
That doesn't sound right. Oh, well, he's doing the response.info. Hold on. He's only showing the extra detail.
yeah, I mean the gRPC structure is probably right. It's probably just the way cry cuddle outputs it, so it's confused.
Yeah.
Another alternative that I looked at, but I really couldn't find and I think this is like because it's a bit newer, is using what's it called, the introspection service to get this information out from plugins as like an alternative to relying on it. I think that I found some issues in regards to getting some of the data that I needed, but I in that, and I think I put it on my list of things to ask. It was like the risk there is eventually that like the exported configuration kind of like grows exponentially eventually, like of like what are we actually like. There are basically like three options, and it's basically either depending on the cry status or exposing the things that I specifically need to the introspection service, or it's adding a generic config dump, like loaded config dump somehow to Containerd that basically gives you the raw TOML that has been compiled together, because that of course has its API that you can then parse and like determine, okay, at least like this has been picked up.
Yeah, I think, I know it's a pain to do a KEP, but currently we require KEPs, Kubernetes enhancement process issues to be opened for any changes to this particular CRI API.
Okay.
So if you wanted to promote something from just a random, JSON config dump that we put in accidentally way back when, we can add new fields for like host information, resolve information, resolve data, and come up with something that all of the container runtimes can expose, right? To explain whether or not mirroring is enabled for this particular their config, right? But that would be a yes or no, true or false kind of thing, right? Or some value if it was, if you wanted to, list the maps. And by maps in this case, I mean mappings from one requested host registry, IP to another. Right?
Yeah. Does it make more sense too? Because obviously a KEP's gonna take a while. Does it make sense to instead expose it? Like I've never written a KEP, but I've followed a few of them, and they always like they're for better or worse take time to kind of discuss through. But like, does it make more sense to add this?
It's not as bad for the CRI ones. For the CRI ones, you just need a few people to be interested. Sergey Kansev and Peter Hunt and myself, we're maintainers for the CRI API. We could add additional fields, for your purpose, right?
Yeah.
Things needed.
But all I'm asking is like more. Does it make even sense to add it here then, or does it make more sense to add an introspection to get the configuration?
I don't think that there's any problem adding that to the introspection API. Specific key value fields, we don't add like large JSON maps, but if there's specific keys you find relevant, I think that's okay to add to introspection.
Yeah, I think it's literally like two fields that I need.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, it's like going to be very limited.
From the introspection perspective, I said that this is just adding an export to the plugin, which I said like that's kind of how we would like to expose stuff, and I would almost go as far to say it's almost reasonable to have the introspection output on the CRI status almost as like one of the verbose fields that could be reasonable, because that would show you like these are the plugins that are actually loaded in Containerd, and these are the values that are actually exported from those plugins. So that's intended to be information that is used by clients or other plugins. So if there's information that you need from a plugin, I think it should be in the introspection service. Obviously with the justification of like why you need that field and what it's used for. It sounds like you
Mhm.
mostly want to use it just like you need this feature on, and if it's not on, then Spiegel can't work correctly, which is, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah. It's like there's a lot, especially like the discard unpacked layers is like something that a lot of cloud providers either set true, like Gkey being one of them that sets it true. And then a bunch of people just come and go, hey, it's not working. And it's like, well, I'd prefer Spiegel to just not even start because it's not going to work because the actual compressed layers aren't even there to be served in the first place. So it would be save me a headache if I could just log that and be like, hey, this flag is incorrect.
Yeah. Um, the well, I think it's fine for that type of configuration because
Mhm.
as I say, the thing I'm about to demo, I'm hoping that discard unpack layers just becomes irrelevant in the future, but that's probably not a too short term of the future. But the counterpoint there is always, well, that's a very internal thing about like the way the garbage collection is going to work. And if we change something to make it irrelevant, then it's like how do you communicate that to clients? Well, yeah, I guess that's not a problem for today, but I think that's just always a risk of like trying to export things that like are they really things that we want clients to be like make a decision off? But yeah, I mean, I think it's fine for like informational. As I said,
Mhm.
as long as it's like key value things and not trying to put
No, yeah.
like Marshall JSON into the exports or something like that. Like price status stuff. I mean, I'm not against adding more stuff to the price status. I just want it to be more deliberate about what we add there, so we're not just accidentally exposing
Agreed.
more API that might get depended on.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. That's a pretty sane standpoint to have.
Yeah, another way we can handle this, Phil, is we can talk to the cryo team whenever you want to add a particular key value field in that info struct, right? To be common. We could have that be common for a while, across cryo. Cryo's got their own key values. That's why but we can come up with a common key value and define it somewhere, where it's a little easier to change without a cap requirement, right? And then we
Yeah,
can, once we show that use, then it makes it easier to write the cap.
and
Just
I'm actually working with some people to add cryo support to Spiegel, so like it's also like that will be eventually be
which is why
relevant.
I'm bringing it up. This
Yeah,
info, we're so different between the two.
yeah,
So you've got really two things you need fixed.
yeah. No, you're right. Yeah,
What's the 10-second description of what Spiegel's doing? I
it
did remember it at some point, but
it does like peer-to-peer image like distribution between like
okay,
Redis nodes. So it's basically like a
that's what I
stateless
thought.
registry
Okay.
inside of your cluster.
Okay, so it's acting more like a registry, not like a tightly
Where
integrated content store or something.
Oh no. So it's basically piggybacking off of Containerd's content store to serve the layers back in between
Gotcha.
nodes.
cool.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're gonna stick around. I'm gonna do the demo of the next thing, and there was actually some of that I was could be a relevant discussion. Maybe not for today, but okay.
Yeah.
Maxim, you have everybody here that you want for the demo.
Yep, I think so. And we're gonna record this as well, right?
I don't like to be recorded, but I think it is
This is
recorded whether or not we
automatically,
like it or not. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
it's
on
automatically
voluntary.
recorded and synced to YouTube.
Pressure. All right. I'll do the Aerofest demo real quick. Some of you already saw this already. Let me give a brief introduction to the Aerofest format. We talked about a few, maybe last month or so. We're talking about it. We have a draft spec for this new image format. The idea is it's utilizing OCI manifests and indexes and everything that we use today for pull-in images, but the actual images are not tar based. It's still using the image config. The main difference in how the images actually end up looking. Let's see, there's an example in here. Oh, not in here, but you can deploy a image that has both tar and AeroFS, and it does that through using the platform structure. So it uses a variant of the platform structure to say if your server supports Z standard images, we can actually prefer prefers the AeroFS. We can actually prefer the AeroFS images over the tar ones. So we can deploy them. You can have an image that supports both. So some of the advantages of having the native AeroFS is we can completely avoid the unpack because AeroFS images can be directly used in Containerd. And that also makes lazy loading much easier because there's no extra step. We can basically take raw devices and map them or use them in containers, and then we can use a tool like dmVerity and to validate its correctness. Anyways, that's kind of the intro to just like AeroFS, and we've been working on how that's going to work in Containerd. We already have the AeroFS snapshotter. It works well today. It has a lot of benefits over any other snapshotter just by nature of can completely avoid doing like tar to file system unpack. You can directly do tar to AeroFS conversion, which saves a lot of syscalls and a lot of permission requirements that are needed today just to unpack an image. So we're using that at Docker already to support natively unpacking images on Windows and Mac OS. Containerd works just as it normally would on Linux. Is only up to the runtime when it actually is going to mount and create the container that you would notice any difference. Okay, I don't have a lot of time, so let me just show how the images will work. So I created a few images. Have a Fedora one first. No, pull it. So this Fedora image actually has the AeroFS layers. I have this nice little viewer, and this is going to show what's being pulled from the registry. It's going to show what is being requested from the runtime itself using FA Notify. So every time a block is getting loaded, there'll be an event that I can visualize to see, and then that will translate to that particular block getting pulled down from a registry. I briefly saw the Z standard. So the way the image is actually laid out, it's AeroFS, but it's chunked up using Z standard frames. And then there's an index at the end that maps to where the actual for each page in AeroFS, it's going to map to which chunk that it's needed. So it can go to the registry and pull the chunk, and it can do the decompression based on just that chunk. So this is going to be pulling. This is pulled the AeroFS image. You can see it didn't pull much of it. It pulled, I think, like 2 chunks from this. Pulled an index, pulled a manifest, pulled the config. It didn't pull the layer, since the layer is going to be lazy loaded in. Some of the visualizations not great there right now. But yeah, that's pretty fast. The state on the disk right now is not changing. That's not doing anything in the background. It's pulled 2 out of 40 chunks. So now I can actually run this. Just going to run binsh. You can see that there's some activity. The yellow represents FA notify. So this is where these are the chunks that the container actually tried, or these are the blocks that the container actually tried to load. This is a fairly small image. So once it started loading, it loaded in the full image. And right now there's some eager polling that's going on. So you could see that it prioritized loading these blocks and then it pulled everything in. But overall, the time of pull and run much faster than before because of that. This is just a normal image. Everything works. One thing to note about FA Notify and the way I think one of the advantages of FA Notify, so when we go to perform the mounts, what we have is we have this chunked compressed file, and we're going to put that into the unpack is basically decompressing it and putting it into a Aerofest file on disk. The way we do the laziness is we just create a sparse file of the exact size that's needed. And we're going to fill in chunks of that sparse file as they get pulled down from the registry. And then you're going to use FA notify pre-access, which is I think it was introduced fairly recently in the kernel. But the pre-access, every time that file gets accessed, that region is going to go to user space to say that basically, can I access this? So it can be used as a permission check, but it can also be used as for preloading. And if that area of the sparse file has not been filled in, it's going to decompress, or it's going to, first off, it's going to see if it has it in the local content store. If not, it's going to start downloading it from the registry. Then it's going to decompress and fill that in. The nice thing about FA Notify is once that sparse file has been completely hydrated, we call it a cache file here, but once that file gets completely hydrated, FA Notify completely goes away, and it's just the same as what we would have today if you pulled and unpacked Aerofest and mounted it. So from like a performance perspective, there's no lingering performance with using with doing it lazily, which is nice from the perspective of that also allows us to throw away those cache files when we're done with them. And this is kind of where I was getting to the maybe discard unpacked layers isn't really relevant for these type of images, because in this case, you always want the compressed layers, and you can just hydrate them when the image runs. And for the most part, like, it's not going to have an impact on performance at all. Like maybe up front, there might be a little bit of a time to get that fully loaded, but let me pull a different image. This one is much more interesting from a lazy perspective because it's really large. This one is like a 7 GB unpacked image, 7.2 gigabytes unpacked. It's about 4 GB packed, so it's like no optimization that can be really done. So just pulling this image, at least on my machine, just doing the pull and unpack takes 5 minutes. So here, the pull was really fast. It only took like 2 seconds. Running it, you'll see that still has stuff to do, and there's improvements that still can be done here in terms of the ordering of which stuff gets loaded. So it is actually okay. So it did actually run like still within like a couple seconds. But if I were to run Python, which is kind of the main thing, you'll see like this command takes a while and it starts lighting up all over. Okay. Let me import import Torch. Yeah, there it's so you can see like these commands run a little slower. It's a lot faster than like the 5 minutes. I think if I just run it all, it can still be done in like less than a minute. There's a lot of optimizations that could be done here. Like you can see that it's sequentially like when the FA notify comes, then it's actually pulling from the registry. So there's a lot of having that like pre-knowledge of the stuff that's going to get pulled will be would help a lot here, as well as possibly like grouping parts of it together. So this usually takes like 45 seconds when it does it like sequentially. Let's see what else do I want to say about this. Oh, just the architecture of this. So it's using each of these green blocks is kind of the chunk, and each of these is going to actually be an object inside of the content store. Okay, you can see it was done, and now it's doing the eager load of the rest of it, which something that could be configurable as well. Each of these green chunks are actually items inside of the content store, and there is something on top of it, like calling the index content store, that basically presents a new piece of content based off those sub pieces. And that index content store works with this cache that creates these sparse files, as well as like it's hooked into from the lazy loading components like FA notify. But it also has this block provider. The block provider is the registry, but it could also be like Spiegel or something peer-to-peer. I think that would be pretty cool. Like it doesn't really matter where you get these blocks from. The registry is kind of the main source to get it from, but as you can see over time, like, yeah, I really don't like the idea of holding on to registry connections for a long time, especially in this case, if you don't want to fully hydrate this image. The reason it's fully hydrated right now is because Containerd wants to get rid of the credentials for the registry. So like we don't want to hold on to those credentials. So we're going to pull everything from the registry and then throw it away. Ideally, we would be able to not or like balance this across disks, or maybe not even load it at all. But okay, we didn't have a lot of time for that. But any questions, comments?
This is nice. I have a question. I looked at the spec, and you introduced like ZSTD compression, but you also can compress the blob itself, right? And decompress it in the kernel. I guess one versus another. Do we need the ZSTD?
The Z standard is more for the framing of anything else. I mean, it does compress it, but we support both. The Z standard is the transport compression, whereas you could have the internal compression as well. My understanding is most users of Aerofest don't want a heavy compression, or don't want to use like the heavy compression algorithms in the actual Aerofest image. But you could, for example, do LZ4 compression for Aerofest. I think that's like the fastest one from the kernel perspective. And then you could still use Z standard for transport as well. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. right now we didn't define. Well, I did define it. I might have pulled it out, like how we would do the lazy loading over the uncompressed. The really nice thing about ZStandard is that you can hide the maps in ZStandard. The ZStandard chunk does that something very similar to like what the StarGZ is doing, but it like hides it nicely in a ZStandard hidden frame. So we're utilizing that here. You could, as long as you have that map, it doesn't really matter. I said like this map is basically fed into this index content store, and the index content store is going to use that to decide what to pull from the registry and like where to put it. But it doesn't have to be compressed.
Mhm.
But yeah, and it's a matter of like you still need all of those chunk markers and stuff so you know where to pull it from. Or like,
Okay.
I guess in that case, it's not really where to pull it from because it's uncompressed. It's more you want to be able to verify everything you get back from the registry is the right hash. You could skip that entirely and just use dmVerity, but I'm still trying to test that out to see whether or not that's really a viable approach. Where basically like you don't even try to validate the content, you just use dmVerity to do it. That's not really what I'm recommending. I think it's good to check stuff at the transport level and then let the runtime level have its checks as well.
Okay. Gotcha. For remote part, you don't need anything additionally besides RFS layer, RFS image itself, right? I mean, like you don't
Yeah.
put any additional metadata there.
I mean the metadata, there's metadata that's baked into the image right now. For the index, basically that index is baked in. But other than that, you don't need to have it. It's not a requirement. And you'll see it actually has in the spec. If you have that metadata, there's annotations that point to it. If you don't have it, then it's just going to pull it like a normal. It's just going to pull it and then compute the hash sequentially. But obviously, to compute the hash sequentially, you have to pull the data sequentially, which is what this is trying to, or that's the big time saving is not having to do that. So
Mm-hmm. Okay, gotcha. Thank you so much. This was nice.
yeah, sorry for going way over on the time eating into the OCI one, but Sean, you have a question? Comment?
I don't want to take this over, but I just did want to follow up on the discussion we had last week about using NRI, and NRI was totally the right answer. I created a POC and extended the NRI spec to include image digest information, which it didn't have before, and used NRI for exactly like I used a validate container adjustment hook, and it worked perfectly. And so I just wanted to thank you guys for the feedback. And then I also created a PR to potentially extend the spec to include image digest information. And I just wanted to, I don't want to take this call over, so we can actually talk about it next time. But I just wanted to just be
Well, that's a good way to end it. So with a thank you. So we're over time anyway. So
yeah,
yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, feel free to ping us on that. Take a look. All right, y'all.
sounds good.
See you in a couple weeks.
See you.
Thank you.